Imagine standing in front of everyone you love, wearing the dress you dreamed about since you were a little girl, ready to marry the man you trust with your whole heart. And in that one moment, right before you say, "I do," the person you trusted the most stands up and destroys everything. That person was not a stranger. She was not an enemy. She was my best friend. The girl who knew every secret I ever had. The girl who held my hand through my parents' divorce, through my first heartbreak, through every late night when I thought I would never be happy again. Her name was Mia. And on the day I was supposed to become the happiest woman alive, she became the reason I fell apart in front of 200 guests. But this story is not just about betrayal. This story is about what happens after. Because sometimes, the universe does not forget. Sometimes, karma takes its time, but when it arrives with a force so complete that no apology, no excuse, and no tears can undo it. My name is Sarah, and this is the story of the day my best friend broke my heart in front of everyone I love, and the story of how, without even trying to take revenge, I watched her entire world collapse in front of my eyes. Stay with me till the end, because what happened during my revenge was not what I planned. It was something far bigger, something I never saw coming. Let me take you back to where it all began, not on my wedding day, but years earlier, when Mia and I were just two young girls who believed friendship was forever. We met in the 6th grade. I was the new girl in school, nervous, quiet, sitting alone at lunch, pretending to read a book so no one would notice how alone I felt. Mia walked up, sat right next to me, and said, "You look like you need a friend. Lucky for you, I have space for one more." From that day, we were inseparable. We shared lockers, shared secrets, shared clothes, shared dreams. When my parents divorced when I was 14, it was Mia who stayed on the phone with me until 3 in the morning, just so I wouldn't feel alone. When she failed her driving test twice, I was the one cheering louder than anyone when she finally passed on the 3rd try. We promised each other something back then, sitting on my bedroom floor, eating ice cream straight from the tub. We said, no matter what happens in life, no matter who comes into our lives, we will always choose each other first. I believed that promise with my whole heart. I never once imagined that the same girl who made that promise to me would be the one to break it in the most public, most painful way possible. Because here is the truth about betrayal. It never comes from strangers. It always comes from the people closest to you. The people who know exactly where your heart is soft, exactly where you are most vulnerable, and exactly how much damage one single moment can do. And Mia knew exactly what she was doing. So let's go back to how I met Daniel, the man who was supposed to be my forever, and how slowly, quietly, without me ever noticing, the two people I loved most were building a secret that would explode on the one day I least expected it. I met Daniel at a mutual friend's birthday party 3 years before the wedding. He was not the loudest person in the room. He was not trying to impress anyone. He was sitting near the drinks table, laughing quietly at something on his phone, and when I asked him what was so funny, he looked up and said, "Nothing important. But now that you're here, this conversation just got a lot more interesting." It was simple. It was easy. And for the first time in years, I felt like I could just be myself around someone without performing, without pretending, without trying too hard. We started dating slowly. Coffee dates that turned into dinner. Dinner that turned into weekend trips. Weekend trips that turned into him meeting my parents and me meeting his. And of course, Mia was there for all of it. She was the one who helped me pick my outfit for our 3rd date. She was the one who told me, "Sarah, this one is different. I can see it in the way he looks at you." She was the one who cried happy tears when Daniel proposed to me on a beach at sunset, down on one knee, with my entire family secretly hiding behind the sand dunes. I asked Mia to be my maid of honor the very next morning. There was no one else I would have chosen. She screamed so loud on the phone that my ears rang for an hour. She said, "Sarah, I promise you, I will make sure your wedding day is the most perfect day of your entire life." Looking back now, I wonder if she meant those words when she said them, or if the plan to destroy everything was already forming in her mind. Because here is what I did not know back then. Somewhere between the proposal and the wedding, something shifted between Mia and Daniel. It was not sudden. It was not one dramatic moment. It was slow, quiet, and hidden in plain sight. It started with small things. Mia would text Daniel directly instead of going through me. "Just to help plan a surprise for you," she said. Daniel would ask Mia for advice on wedding details instead of asking me. I wanted it to be a surprise, he said. I never questioned it. Why would I? These were the two people I trusted most in the world. I thought their closeness was a gift. I used to tell people, I'm so lucky. My best friend and my fiancé get along so well. I had no idea that getting along well was becoming something else entirely. I had no idea that late-night phone calls, disguised as wedding planning, were slowly becoming something more personal. I had no idea that the woman who promised to always choose me first was quietly falling into something with the man I was about to marry. The wedding planning continued. Venue booked. Dress chosen. Invitations sent. 200 guests confirmed. Every detail felt like a dream coming true. But there was one detail I could not see, hidden behind every smile, every hug, every, I'm so happy for you, that Mia gave me during those months. She was not happy for me. She was jealous of me. And jealousy, when it is left to grow quietly in the dark, does not stay quiet forever. Eventually, it finds a moment to explode. And it chose my wedding day to do exactly that. The morning of my wedding, I woke up before my alarm even rang. The sun was barely up, but I could not sleep another minute. I lay in bed for a moment just staring at the ceiling, my heart racing with excitement, thinking, today, I marry the man I love. My mother came into the room holding 2 cups of tea, her eyes already filled with tears. My baby girl is getting married today, she said, and we both laughed and cried at the same time. Mia arrived an hour later with coffee, pastries, and a playlist of our favorite songs from high school. She helped me into my dress, her hands steady as she buttoned the back, each button clicking into place like a small piece of the perfect day falling together. You look unbelievable, she said, standing behind me, both of us looking at my reflection in the mirror. Daniel is the luckiest man alive. I remember smiling at her reflection and saying, I'm the lucky one. I have you as my best friend and him as my husband. What more could I possibly ask for? She smiled back, but for a brief second, something in her eyes flickered. I noticed it, but I dismissed it instantly. I told myself it was just emotion. Weddings make everyone emotional, I thought. I never imagined that flicker was guilt. Or maybe it was hesitation. Maybe, even in that final hour, some part of her was fighting whether to go through with what she had already decided to do. The ceremony began exactly on time. 200 guests, string lights hanging above the outdoor venue, soft music playing as I walked down the aisle on my father's arm. I remember looking at Daniel standing at the altar, his eyes glassy with tears, his hands trembling slightly as I reached him. We exchanged our vows. I promised to love him through every season of life, through joy and difficulty, through everything the future would bring. He promised the same, his voice breaking with emotion as he spoke. Then came the reception. Dinner, laughter, dancing, toast from family and friends. Everything felt like a scene from a movie, the kind of moment you want to freeze in time forever. And then it was Mia's turn to give the maid of honor speech. She stood up, tapped her glass gently with a spoon, and the room fell into a warm, expectant silence. Everyone smiled, ready for a heartfelt speech about friendship and love. She began sweetly. Sarah and I have been best friends since we were 11 years old. The room laughed softly, warmly, waiting for more stories about our childhood. But then her voice changed. It became slower, colder, and she said the words that would change everything. But there's something Sarah doesn't know. Something I think everyone deserves to hear before she marries a man who isn't who she thinks he is. The room went completely silent. My smile froze on my face. And in that single second, I felt my entire world begin to crack. 200 people stared at Mia, forks frozen halfway to their mouths, glasses of champagne suspended in the air. My heart pounded so loudly I could hear it in my own ears. Mia, what are you talking about? I asked, forcing a laugh, hoping this was some kind of strange joke that would end with everyone laughing and clinking glasses again. But she did not laugh. She looked directly at me, and then she looked at Daniel, whose face had gone completely pale. I have to say this now, Mia said, her voice shaking, but not stopping. Because if I don't say it today, I will regret it forever. Daniel has feelings for me, and I have feelings for him too. It's been happening for months. I tried to stop it. I swear I tried. But I can't stand up here and watch you marry him while pretending none of this ever happened. The silence in that room was the loudest sound I have ever heard in my entire life. I looked at Daniel, desperately searching his face for denial, for outrage, for anything that would prove Mia was lying. But instead, I saw guilt. Raw, unmistakable guilt written across every line of his face. "Sarah, I'm so sorry," he whispered, barely audible. "I was going to tell you. I didn't know how." The room around me blurred. Someone gasped. My mother stood up, so fast her chair fell backward with a crash that echoed through the silence. My father's face turned to stone. Somewhere in the crowd, someone whispered, "Oh my God," loud enough for the whole room to hear. I felt my legs go weak beneath me. My hands, still holding the wedding bouquet, began to shake so violently that white rose petals fell onto the floor like tears. "How long?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "How long has this been happening?" Mia's eyes filled with tears, but I felt no sympathy for her in that moment. Only a burning, hollow ache that spread through my chest like fire. "Almost a year," she said. "It started slowly. I never meant for it to happen. But I love him, Sarah. I couldn't watch you marry him without saying something. A year. An entire year of smiling in my face. An entire year of helping me choose wedding flowers, helping me write vows, holding my hand and telling me how lucky I was. An entire year of lies dressed up as friendship." I do not remember exactly what happened in the next few minutes. I remember running. I remember my dress catching on a chair as I pushed past guests, past shocked faces, past camera flashes from confused photographers who did not know whether to keep filming or stop. I remember my mother's arms catching me just outside the venue doors, holding me as I collapsed onto the grass in my white wedding dress, sobbing so hard I could barely breathe. 200 guests. An entire life planned. Years of love, trust, and friendship. All of it destroyed in less than 60 seconds by the two people I trusted more than anyone else in this world. That night, I did not sleep in the honeymoon suite. I slept on my childhood bedroom floor, my mother beside me, both of us silent, both of us broken, staring at the ceiling until the sun came up. I thought that night was the worst night of my life. I had no idea that the truth was even bigger, even darker than what Mia had confessed in front of everyone. And I had no idea that karma was already quietly setting its plan into motion. For the first week after the wedding that never finished, I barely left my bed. I did not answer calls. I did not read messages. I existed in a strange, numb silence, replaying the moment over and over in my mind, searching for signs I had missed, searching for clues I had ignored. It was my cousin Layla who finally convinced me to check my phone. "You need to see this," she said gently, handing me her own phone with trembling hands. I think there's more to this story than what Mia said at the wedding. What I discovered over the following days was worse than I ever imagined. A close friend from Daniel's office, feeling guilty about staying silent for so long, reached out to me privately. She revealed that Daniel and Mia's relationship had not started slowly, as Mia claimed. It had started the very week Daniel proposed to me on that beach. While I was crying happy tears into my pillow, telling everyone how lucky I was, Daniel had been sending messages to Mia that same night, and Mia had been responding within minutes. I found old messages, screenshots that guests and friends had quietly saved and finally decided to share with me. Message after message showing a pattern of deception that had been carefully hidden for almost the entire length of our engagement. Mia had not simply fallen for Daniel by accident, the way she tried to make it sound at the wedding. She had planned moments to be alone with him. She had encouraged him to distance himself from me during stressful wedding planning weeks, telling him things like, "Sarah is so busy right now. She probably won't even notice if you talk to me instead." She had used our friendship, my trust, and every secret I had ever shared with her to slowly insert herself into my relationship until she felt entitled enough to blow it up in the most humiliating way possible, on the one day she knew would hurt me most. And there was something even worse. Mia was engaged herself to a wonderful man named Omar, who had no idea any of this was happening. He had been planning his own future with a woman who had spent an entire year betraying not just me, but him as well. When I found this out, something inside me shifted. My grief slowly began transforming into something else. Not anger exactly. Something clearer. Something calmer. A quiet, steady determination. I realized something important in those dark days. I did not need to plan some elaborate revenge. I did not need to scream, or fight, or destroy anything myself. All I needed to do was make sure the truth, the entire truth, reached the people who deserved to know it. Because liars like Mia and Daniel do not fear anger. They fear exposure. They fear the moment when the mask falls off in front of everyone who still believes it. And that moment, without me even planning it fully, was already beginning to arrive. I want to be honest with you about something important. I did not sit in my room plotting some dramatic revenge scheme. I was not interested in destroying anyone out of spite. What I wanted was simple. I wanted the truth to be known, completely and clearly, by everyone who had been lied to. Because here is something I learned through this experience. The most powerful revenge is not the one you force. It is the one that happens naturally, when the truth simply comes out, and people see clearly, for the first time, exactly who someone really is. I decided to do 3 things. First, I reached out privately to Omar, Mia's fiancé, not out of anger toward him, but out of respect. He deserved to know the truth about the woman he was planning to marry. I sent him the messages I had gathered, gently, without exaggeration, without adding anything dramatic. I simply said, I think you deserve to know this before you make a lifelong commitment. Second, I spoke honestly with my closest family and friends about everything I had discovered, not to gossip, but because they had all witnessed the public betrayal and deserved to understand the full depth of what had actually happened. Third, and most importantly, I focused on myself. I canceled the honeymoon. I informed the venue, the caterers, and the photographers that the wedding was canceled, and I asked for whatever refunds were possible. I moved back in with my parents for a few months, giving myself time to heal without rushing back into normal life. I did not chase Daniel for an explanation. I did not scream at Mia over the phone. I did not post angry messages online exposing them for public entertainment. I simply stepped back, let the truth exist in the open, and allowed the natural consequences of their choices to unfold. And oh, did they unfold. Within 2 weeks, Omar ended his engagement to Mia. He did not do it quietly either. He returned the engagement ring to her at her workplace, in front of her colleagues, saying only, "I hope it was worth it," before walking away. Word spread quickly, the way it always does. Mia's own family was devastated and humiliated. Her mother, who had once treated me like a second daughter, called me crying, apologizing on behalf of a daughter she no longer recognized. Meanwhile, Daniel's own family, deeply embarrassed by the public scandal, began distancing themselves from him. His mother, who had cried tears of joy during our wedding vows just weeks earlier, reportedly told him, "I raised you better than this." I did not have to say a single cruel word. I did not have to plan a single dramatic confrontation. I simply stepped out of the way and let the truth speak louder than anything I could have shouted myself. But even I could not have predicted just how far the consequences would eventually reach, or how completely karma was preparing to finish what I had only begun. 3 months after my wedding day fell apart, I heard the news that changed everything again, this time in a way that felt like the universe itself had decided to step in and settle the score. Daniel worked as a manager at a mid-sized financial company, a job he had worked incredibly hard to build over almost 8 years. It turned out that Mia, in the weeks following the scandal, desperate and emotionally unstable after losing both her engagement and her reputation, had shown up at his workplace multiple times, creating public scenes, demanding he choose her properly, now that everything was already destroyed. One of these confrontations happened during an important client meeting. Mia arrived uninvited, emotional and shouting, in front of senior executives and important clients Daniel had spent months trying to secure. The scene was humiliating, unprofessional, and completely public. Within a month, Daniel was let go from his position. Officially, the company cited conduct unbecoming of a company representative. Unofficially, everyone in that industry circle knew exactly what had happened, and word travels fast in small professional communities. Mia's own situation collapsed even further. She worked as an event coordinator, a career built entirely on trust, discretion, and reputation. But after the engagement scandal, several of her existing clients, uncomfortable with the public drama surrounding her name, quietly canceled their contracts. Within 6 months, she had lost the majority of her client base and was forced to leave the company she had spent years building a name within. Here is the part that truly amazed me. Daniel and Mia did try to build a relationship together after everything collapsed. But without the excitement of secrecy, without the thrill of something forbidden, their relationship reportedly fell apart within just a few months. Two people who built their connection on betrayal discovered that a foundation built on lies cannot support anything lasting. I heard, through mutual acquaintances, that they were no longer speaking to each other at all, both left alone, without each other, without their old careers, and without the reputations they once had. I want to be clear about something important here. I felt no joy in their suffering. I did not celebrate their downfall with parties or gloating messages. What I felt instead was a quiet, peaceful sense of closure. Not because they were punished, but because I finally understood something deeply important. People who build their happiness on someone else's pain rarely get to keep that happiness for very long. The truth always finds its way to the surface eventually. And when it does not need anyone's help to create consequences. It simply needs time, patience, and the natural unfolding of cause and effect. I did not destroy Daniel and Mia's lives. Their own choices did that. All I did was refuse to protect them from the truth any longer. Healing did not happen overnight. I want to be completely honest about that, because I think it is important for anyone listening to this story who has experienced a similar betrayal. For the first few months, I struggled with simple things. I struggled to trust new people. I struggled to attend weddings, even for close family members, without my hands trembling slightly at the sight of a bride walking down the aisle. I struggled with the quiet moments at night, when the apartment felt too silent and my mind would wander back to that single sentence that changed everything. But slowly, day by day, I began rebuilding pieces of myself that I did not even realize I had lost during the relationship. I reconnected with old hobbies I had abandoned years earlier. I started painting again, something I had loved as a teenager but had given up completely during the years of wedding planning and relationship stress. I started traveling with my cousin Layla, small weekend trips at first, then longer adventures to places I had always wanted to see but never had the courage to visit alone. I built new friendships, slower this time, more carefully. Not because I believed everyone would betray me the way Mia did, but because I learned the importance of allowing trust to grow naturally, instead of assuming it instantly just because someone calls themselves your best friend. About a year after the wedding that never finished, I met someone new. His name was Ahmed, a quiet, kind man I met through a mutual friend at a small art exhibition. He was patient with me in ways I did not know I needed. He never rushed our relationship. He never pressured me to move faster than I was ready for. When I finally told him the full story of my wedding day, expecting shock or pity, he simply took my hand and said, "Thank you for trusting me enough to tell me. And I promise you, I am not interested in being anyone's temporary happiness. I want to build something real, slowly, with you." 2 years after that painful wedding day, Ahmed and I got married in a small, quiet ceremony with only our closest family and a handful of true friends. No 200 guests. No elaborate reception. Just the people who had truly stood beside me through the darkest chapter of my life. There was no dramatic maid of honor speech that day. No secrets revealed in front of strangers. Just quiet vows, honest love, and a peaceful joy that felt completely different from the anxious excitement I had felt years earlier. I often think back to that terrible day, and instead of feeling only pain when I remember it, I now feel something closer to gratitude. Because that devastating betrayal, as painful as it was, protected me from spending the rest of my life married to a man who did not truly value me, and freed me from a friendship that had quietly turned toxic long before I ever noticed. If you have stayed with me through this entire story, I want to leave you with the most important lessons I learned through this painful chapter of my life. The first lesson is this: loyalty should never be assumed simply because of history. Mia and I had over a decade of friendship behind us, but history alone does not guarantee someone's character in the present moment. People change. Sometimes jealousy, insecurity, or unresolved feelings can quietly transform even the closest relationships into something unrecognizable. The second lesson is this: you do not need to seek revenge to see justice. I never plotted against Daniel or Mia. I never lied, manipulated, or schemed to destroy their lives. I simply stopped protecting people who did not deserve my silence. And the natural consequences of their own choices did the rest. Karma does not need your help. It only needs time. The third lesson is this: sometimes the most painful moments in life are actually the universe protecting you from a future filled with far greater pain. If Mia had never revealed the truth that day, I may have spent years, even decades, married to a man capable of that level of betrayal, never knowing the truth, always sensing something was wrong but unable to name it. The fourth lesson, and perhaps the most important one, is this. Your worth is never defined by someone else's betrayal. For months after that wedding, I questioned my own value. I wondered what was wrong with me, why I was not enough to keep either of them faithful. But the truth is, their betrayal was never about my worth. It was about their own broken choices, their own lack of integrity, and their own inability to be honest, even with themselves. If you are listening to this story because you have experienced something similar, a betrayal from someone you trusted deeply, I want you to hear this clearly. The pain you feel right now is real, and it is valid, and you are allowed to grieve it fully. But please do not let that pain convince you that you are unworthy of real, honest love. Somewhere ahead of you, there is a version of your life filled with people who will choose you completely, without secrets, without hidden betrayals, without needing a public collapse to reveal the truth. I found that life with Ahmed. I found peace in rebuilding myself before rebuilding my relationships. And I found that even the most devastating moment of my life eventually became the very thing that led me toward a life far more honest and far more peaceful than the one I almost had. If this story resonated with you, if you have ever experienced betrayal from someone you deeply trusted, I want you to know something important. You survived it, and surviving it means you are already stronger than you realize. Thank you for listening until the very end. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear it today, and remember this simple truth. The truth always finds its way to the surface eventually. All you have to do is have the patience to let it rise.